Say it again.
Yeah, Donald Trump, the most anti-abortion president in my lifetime.
That's right.
If we give, we may never get these rights back.
Abortion access is more popular than most candidates.
Can we work together to bring the temperature down? What do you think we should be doing?
I'm going to end with some hard-hitting questions.
Uh-oh.
Welcome, everyone. It's our first podcast, My Body, My Pod, a Reproductive Freedom podcast with our very special guest, Illinois Governor JB Pritzker, who is himself an incredible champion. You're one of the top champions on this issue in the country, and we're going to dig into it, and we're going to talk about stories, strategies, the people shaping this work, including this governor, who you're going to hear a lot more about, and how we can win back our fundamental freedoms. And that is what this podcast is going to be all about. How do we work together to fight back and win? And honestly, couldn't think of a better guest to start having that conversation with than you, Governor. Some of our biggest wins in the country last cycle were reproductive freedom ballot measures that you fought and you were a part of. So I want to get to that in a minute. But welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for being my very first guest.
Minnie, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited that you've launched this podcast and that I get to be on your first show.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool for us to have you. So I know your very first political event was actually at an abortion rights rally. And I know it was with someone you really care about and love. So wanted to let you talk about your earliest activism and sort of the path that brought you to this work.
Thank you. And I'm going to talk about my mother, as you know. And, my mother was my hero. She, first of all, she was an activist and an advocate and somebody who cared deeply about protecting people's rights, whether we're talking about reproductive rights, civil rights, or LGBTQ rights. And she made it known to everybody and anybody who would listen, where she stood. And she marched and she spoke out. And I have to say, as a kid, I remember my brother and sister and I being lined up. I'm the youngest, and we would get lined up at the dining room table, stuffing envelopes for candidates that she was advocating for. And I was stuck at the end, licking stamps and putting them on the envelopes while she was, putting their addresses on. My brother and sister folding and stuffing. So I grew up in a home where, this was really important to all of us. And watching my mother, who was just this very powerful individual who, was very smart. And I would say it's sort of in my DNA to fight for these freedoms. Or, you'd say nurture nature. I'm not sure, but it feels like it's in my DNA. And so every time I'm out there advocating for reproductive rights, I feel like my mother, who passed away, unfortunately, when I was 17, but I feel like she's with me, when I'm fighting those fights. And now that I'm governor, I was doing that before I was governor. Now that I'm governor, I feel a real responsibility to get big things done. And I feel like I'm doing it in her name.
So I feel like there's a through line between strong mothers, strong women, and really great policymakers like yourself. So I don't think it's an accident that you have now established yourself as one of the most foremost governors on policy for reproductive health in this country, understanding that it comes from your family and your upbringing. And I think that, your mother would be really proud. I feel like, can I say that? Am I allowed to say that? It means a lot to me, yeah. I have a strong mom who also protests and went to rallies when she first came to this country. And I know it means a lot to her to know that I'm doing this work. So I feel like we have that. We can connect on strong moms, but so many of the folks in our movement have these great stories of learning at the kitchen table. This issue is really central to your career. And I don't know how many people who follow you and follow your career understand how central abortion access has been to your work as governor. I wanted to ask you to talk about Illinois post-Dobbs. I mean, you were doing this work pre-Dobbs. And we talked about earlier before we started rolling how ahead of the curve Illinois was, understanding what could happen if we lost Roe at a time that folks just didn't think that was possible. So that was an issue that came up in your campaign. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was. And I should remind you that for so many years, and I know you were doing this very same thing, it was about marching and protesting and making your voice heard and helping elect candidates who were pro-choice. And so that kind of predates my running for governor. And then when I was running, there was an issue in Illinois. The legislature was trying to pass a bill to get rid of the trigger laws that existed so that if Roe v. Wade was overturned, which at the time seemed maybe far off, but it could happen, but let's just be safe about it. So we had a bill that actually passed the legislature, and my opponent, the Republican governor, who had pledged not to be anti-choice. He wasn't so much pro-choice, but he pledged not to be anti-choice. But he didn't want to sign it, and so there was a lot of pressure on him. By lots of folks, and me included. And while I was running against him, I gathered signatures and gathered postcards and lots of other folks. And I, made a big stink about, delivering big boxes of postcards to his office. And anyway, he was pressured into signing it, which is terrific.
Yeah, for a Republican.
Yes,
absolutely.
And honestly, I mean, he didn't do a lot of great things for the state, but that is one good thing that he did. But it was after a lot of pressure was put on him. So then I got elected, and I said, all right, we got to go much farther than that. We introduced and passed, and I enacted the Reproductive Health Act, which guarantees abortion rights in
Codifies it in Illinois.
100%. And it really, it was the most established kind of set of rules around, protecting abortion rights that had ever been passed in Illinois. And it is in place today. And it was just the beginning, but it was a big, big deal. It was my first 4 or 5 months in office.
And this is, again, pre-Dobbs.
It was pre-Dobbs. And so, now fast forward. Dobbs came, and we passed a few things in between.
Quite a bit. There's a long list.
Protecting a lot of the services and increasing.
And contraceptives and reimbursement rates for providers and so much. I mean, what are you most proud of? It's hard to pick a favorite, but
it is. But I think people should recognize in this moment in particular the things to be most proud of. Certainly, the launching forward with the Reproductive Health Act really is a big deal. But in this moment, when there's so much pressure to move backward, and the federal government is really, and Donald Trump, who claimed he wasn't going to do anything negative on abortion, of course, is the most anti-abortion president we've had that I can remember.
Right.
So
say it again.
Yeah, Donald Trump, the most anti-abortion president in my lifetime.
That's right.
So, but he lied, of course, when he was running and said, I'm not going to do anything about that. But here we are.
He said he'd leave it to the states.
And the reason I raised that is because when you ask, what am I most proud of? You'd like to say all the, big leaps forward to protect and advance rights. But it's in this moment where we're in defensive mode, where I think we should be really proud of the work that's being done, because if we give, this protective wall that we've built to push back, if we give, we may never get these rights back. And so I'm proudest of the fight that I'm putting in, that we're all putting in on this issue when the most pressure is being applied.
So there's so many questions I want to ask you, and I'm going to come back to the Donald Trump of it all, because that is a major piece of this conversation I want to have with you. But you talked about we may never get these rights back. And you and your organization, Think Big, have actually gone ahead and started thinking about how do we ensure these rights in other states? How do we take what we've done in Illinois and help support other states do the same, since, Republicans and the Supreme Court said it's up to the states. And I had the great privilege, my team in places like Nevada and Arizona, to work with you and your team to make sure we passed ballot measures and we passed protections in those states, much like Illinois did. Can you talk about, you're very ahead of the curve. You even understood and have said on the record that Roe didn't, frankly, go far enough, and we need even more protections. So not only are you enshrining these rights in Illinois and expanding the way we're looking at access to care, you're also helping other states fight back and codify protections, and you're also helping think about what comes next. So can you talk a little bit about what we've learned, what you've learned in this work, and what you just said, that, we have to fight as hard as we can now because we may not get these rights back, and how you're strategically doing that?
Well, I should start by saying it's a team effort, and thank you for everything that you and your organization and all of the organizations that have stood up. I think about the states that we went into, with our organization. We didn't just
Huge.
sort of land a spaceship in the middle of the desert somewhere, and I guess that could be the case in Nevada and Arizona, landing in the middle of a desert. But it was because there were activists on the ground who had created the environment in which we could possibly win.
Right.
And so we went into a whole bunch of states, 10 states, as a matter of fact. And again, just to sit at the table and
you won 7 out of 10.
We did. And
I'm going to count Florida because we kind of won Florida.
We kind of did win Florida. And by the way, we kind of can win Florida again, but we'll get back to that.
Yeah.
Look, and 7 out of 10 is not bad.
It's huge.
But I got to say that it was a real battle. In so many places, and in some places it was just pushing back on the laws that were trying to be passed or amendments that were trying to be passed, and in many places it was codifying into constitutions of the states these reproductive rights. And so, I felt like after I won re-election in 2022, and I knew we had done and were doing everything that we could do in Illinois to protect reproductive freedom, that, I think a lot about, I was involved in building a Holocaust museum. And during that endeavor, sitting next to the Holocaust survivors, you learn a lot, not just because you know the history of the Holocaust, but because here you're sitting next to people who lived it. And one of the things that you think about is kind of the idea that if I'm not protecting other people's rights, if I'm not standing up and fighting for the LGBTQ community, or I'm not fighting for poor women who can't access reproductive health, then what happens when my rights are being taken away?
Right.
And so I really believe that's our obligation, right? Stand up for one another and our freedoms. The Republicans often say that they're for freedom, but actually it's been Democrats who fight for civil rights and human rights. And I, sorry to get too partisan here because there are the occasional pro-choice
You should feel
Republican.
free to get as partisan as you would like on this podcast.
But I must say that's some of what motivated me to go across the country and be involved with these organizations. So, we had great success. Nevada was one where there was a lot of excitement, a lot of opportunity, but it's a hard row to hoe because you've got to pass it
again
2 times in a row.
Yep.
So we've done it once.
We're gearing up again.
And we won big.
Yep.
But we got to do it one more time.
Yep.
And so we're going to be there for that.
Missouri is the one where we had great success, but we have a legislature and statewide officials who won't enforce. So that's why it's so much more. You've got to pass the ballot measures, but you also have to have leaders like you in place in these states to really realize the promise of the ballot measure or to even enforce it, right?
And imagine what would have happened in Missouri if we hadn't actually gotten it passed. I get that they haven't done what they're supposed to do yet, but they can't move forward with their nefarious plan.
That's a really great point. And it's not a loss, but for me, it dovetails into the need for to elect folks to office too. So we know the majority of Americans, including independents and Republicans, including Trump supporters in these 7 states, crossed over and voted on these ballot measures.
Yeah, look at Ohio. Look at Kansas.
That's right.
Nobody thought Kansas.
I mean, out of the gate.
It's right. And that is actually, I think, the indicator to all of us that we share in common, Democrats and Republicans, a belief in freedom.
That's right.
And that there are fundamental rights that belong to you.
And that this issue is salient and this issue is a winner, as you showed in your campaign for governor with the Republican governor signing this. They know that this issue is popular. They know that this issue will continue to be a driver in the election. And I would argue right now, abortion access is more popular than most candidates on the ballot, and not in your state, but in a lot of other parts of the country, because folks understand that that's a fundamental freedom that they need and that's under threat. I think the challenge we're having right now is making sure people understand what you said earlier. So I want to pivot back to Donald Trump, that he is the most anti-abortion president we've ever had. That's been harder to stick.
He endorses people who have these retrograde awful views about abortion. My opponent back in 2022, who Donald Trump endorsed, said that abortion is worse than the Holocaust. And now we replayed that over and over again for the public because the public in Illinois does not agree with him.
Absolutely.
And I think that comment has been made by many Republicans, and those are Trump-backed Republicans.
Absolutely.
So he hides the fact that he is, at least, when he talks to the public, he doesn't say that he's anti-choice Donald Trump. But, of course, he backs all the anti-choice candidates and seems, by the way, to appoint people to office, all of whom are anti-choice. So, look, I don't think we need to really establish that he is anti-choice. It's just a given at this point.
Yeah.
But I do think that we have to recognize that he consistently prevaricates. He consistently tries to portray himself differently or as if he's more moderate than he actually is. And people need to start seeing through it if they haven't already.
Well, and one of the reasons we wanted to start this podcast and we wanted to start creating our own content is we knew we had to get this message out in different mediums, right? That we weren't able to completely stick what happened with the Supreme Court and Roe v. Wade on Trump, that the average voter wasn't paying close enough attention. And we, as a movement, were not breaking through to some of those voters. So that's part of what we're trying to do. And I think he was successful in saying leave it to the states. I think that makes sense for folks in Illinois who voted for you, or folks in Arizona who voted for a ballot measure. But you have to look at all the states, the 21 states with abortion bans and extreme restrictions, and realize he also means that when he says leave it to the states.
But I want to remind people that, yes, it's true that where you've got a trifecta of Democrats in a state who are pro-choice, great, our rights are protected. But you got to remember that governors, just to pick one office, but a governor, we pick our Secretary of Health.
That's right.
Right? We're the ones who decide who's doing human services and how they're going to be executed in the state, right? And so if you happen to elect a Republican in a state, it happens even in a Democratic-leaning state.
Yeah.
You're ending up with a government. You might have a legislature that's pro-choice, but if you've got a governor who's anti-choice, a lot of the services that you'll rely upon for your reproductive freedom will be taken away.
And that list of accomplishments you've had as governor of Illinois for reproductive freedom, we have a longer list of things Donald Trump has done since he's been president to attack reproductive freedom, including what his FDA is doing right now, which is, trying to reclassify mifepristone,
yes,
going after legal medication abortion, reversing EMTALA, something you protected in Illinois, and the list goes on, including like some of his most extremist appointees. So, that's the point. It's just harder to make the case, but that's what we're going to keep doing over and over again. And I want to pivot to talk about you and your fight, frankly, with this president who is frankly a bully, and how you've been showing the rest of the country how you stand up to a bully when he's picking on your city and your state. You recently told Donald Trump, I'm going to quote you, "Mr. President, do not come to Chicago. You are neither wanted here or needed here." Tell me more about that. Tell us more about that moment. And
well, he was threatening.
There's a lot to learn from that moment.
He was threatening to send National Guard to Illinois. He still is.
Yeah.
Depending on which side of the bed he gets up on in the morning, he will say, we're sending them to Chicago or we're not sending them to Chicago. And I honestly think he is suffering from some dementia. And that should worry all of us, if not everything else about the man. So, look, we stood together. I want to be clear, but it wasn't just me standing and saying these things. And of course, I've repeated them, and I think I've been very emphatic about it. But in the first day, and exactly what you're quoting, what we did was the business community stood next to me, and the clergy, and small business people, and activists, and nonprofit organizations.
Yeah.
It really was the panoply, and just ordinary people. We had lots of folks in a big crowd, standing there together. I was articulating, I think, what they wanted to articulate too, which is we don't want military troops on the streets of our American cities.
That's right.
And especially not in Chicago. And, he's blaming it on crime. Chicago's our homicide rate has gone down by 50%. We've cut it in half. Every, violent crime that you can imagine, right? The statistics down, because we've been fighting it using violent crime intervention programs, making sure that we've got police. I believe in police. I don't know about you, but when I dial 911, I want somebody to show up. But you also need to be providing mental health and substance use treatment and other things. And we've done that holistically in order to deal with crime, because it got really bad by 2020 and 2021 in the midst of the worst parts of the pandemic, right? We had to use every tool in the toolbox. But one thing we would not do is to call out military troops to do law enforcement. They don't know how to do that. And I have the best National Guard in the entire country in Illinois, if you ask me, and they know how to go fight. They get trained to go to war. They don't get trained to patrol streets, to arrest people, to do crowd control. That's not what they're trained to do. So I had to say to the president, do not even think about sending them to Chicago. Okay, so he's going to continue to threaten to do that. It is illegal. It is unconstitutional. We're going to have to go take him to court if he tries to do it in Illinois. But I honestly, right now, what we're fighting is he's sent ICE onto the streets of Chicago. And we have so many people, black and brown people, people who speak with an accent or speak with another language, who are now being harassed and intimidated, who are afraid to come out of their homes. We're not just talking about undocumented people. We're talking about U.S. citizens. Just yesterday, they arrested a U.S. citizen who was doing nothing except just walking along the street. And this is the problem with what Donald Trump is attempting to do. I don't want violent criminals on my street if they're undocumented or otherwise.
Right.
But if you want to really help us fight crime, give us more FBI and ATF. Allow us.
But that's not what this is really about.
It is not, and that is the point that I would like to end this segment on anyway, which is what is it really about? What it is really about is sending troops into cities to intimidate people for the 2026 elections. That is what he is really about. And
his power grab.
This is a guy, remember, this is a guy who likes to foment violence. And so, all of the things that he has said and all the things that he's done, I mean, to incite the January 6th rioters, the Stop the Steal movement. And then when they commit crimes, and I'm talking violent crimes, what does he do? He pardons them. He
also pardoned the FACE Act violators. These are the folks who who are attacking abortion clinics.
Right.
I mean, so there's a direct connection between all of these populations, all of these very violent extremist movements, and Donald Trump.
He has often called for violence. I mean, literally voiced it, even as when he is president, not just as a candidate, not just as a private citizen, as president. And this is not what we need in this country, and especially in this moment, So I wish that he was a person of higher moral character. He is not. There's nothing, I can't expect that he will change. What I can do, though, is stand up, speak out, protest, make sure that our voices are heard, and ensure that we have people who understand that their megaphones and their microphones, and most importantly, their march to the ballot box is really going to make a difference.
Well, speaking of that, I'm a Texan, and I was really pleased to see you sheltering some of my friends who are Texas legislators when they had to come to Chicago to break quorum in Texas. Of course, in the end, we lost that redistricting fight in Texas, but now we have a big one coming up in California, and we'll see some other places as well. Can you talk about that moment and why you felt it was so important to take in that group of Texas legislators?
Yeah. Let me be clear. I know you're a Texan, but you're welcome in Illinois anytime. And
my husband is a University of Chicago alum.
So. Oh, there you go. All right. Well, so there's every opportunity for you to move to Illinois. I'll show up at your door with a basket.
Currently, I live in Maryland, and we're doing pretty. We've got a good governor.
You do.
Too, who's facing similar fights.
Yes, he is, and he's a really good guy.
Yeah.
A friend. Well, look, I had talked to the Texas legislators about their fight and what they were planning to do, and just offered them, if you want to come somewhere, Illinois is your safe haven.
Yeah.
And so they called us up and said, we're getting ready to do it. We'd like to do it in Illinois.
Yeah.
So we were very pleased. We had a vast majority of them came to Illinois, and we welcomed them. We found them a place to stay. We made sure that they had a stage from which to to speak.
That's really important.
And we, the elected officials of Illinois, stood with them. And so I'm very pleased about the fight that and you know what they allowed us to do? So even though, you'd say, well, in Texas they lost. Not really. They did something hugely important. They provided time.
Yeah.
Because California was not ready to take this battle on. No one else was. And because they brought attention, the Texas legislators brought attention to the issue and stood strong in the couple of weeks that they could, they gave California time to get ready. And so now, even though Texas has now done Donald Trump's bidding, I think about, remember in 2020 when he called up, we now have tape, audio tape of Donald Trump calling up the Secretary of State of Georgia and saying, can you just find me 11,000 votes?
Greg Abbott has less integrity than the Secretary of State of Georgia.
That's clear.
Yeah.
And so, can you just give me 5 more congressional districts? So what does Greg Abbott do? He capitulates. And so it was important, the work that the Texas legislators, the Democratic legislators did to push back, to draw attention. It really created the environment in which we now understand Donald Trump is manipulating the system. I think people across the country understand that, and people are activating to push back. Indeed, in Missouri, there's now going to be an effort, a referendum to push back on what the Missouri governor and legislature are trying to do.
That's incredible.
It is. And, of course, we've got to pass something, or they've got to pass something in California in order to redistrict there to fight what Texas has done. It's a terrible thing. This is not something that was ever intended by the founders. We're supposed to do redistricting at the beginning of each decade, right after we do a census.
Yeah.
And now here we are in the middle. Why? Because Donald Trump is trying to manipulate. He knows that he's going to lose the Congress in 2026 if he doesn't do something to cheat.
Yeah, I don't think it's an accident that this all started after the big, I can say this, right?
Ugly.
It's our show, the big bullshit bill. That's what we've been calling it in our office. The big bullshit bill. How incredibly unpopular it is, how incredibly unpopular he is. And frankly, that's a reproductive freedom issue too, because just those cuts to Medicaid alone, 40% of all births in the United States of America are covered by Medicaid. Mm-hmm. Prenatal care, postpartum care, defunding Planned Parenthood, incredibly damaging. And he knew how unpopular it was, and he was able to get away with it. And now we've got a CR fight, a continuing resolution budget fight right now. Gearing up for, I think, Friday and on the Hill. So understanding that we have Democratic governors across the country who are willing to fight back at a time that we don't have a single chamber at the federal level is really important, because we're in scary, scary times.
But I have to say that, as you're pointing out, the appropriations bills that are going to get taken up, we need the House and the Senate to stand up and not
Agree
vote for
completely.
this.
I feel confident they will, but we got to keep the pressure.
And I think they will do the right thing, and I think we all need to support them in that endeavor, and they need to be clear about what they're demanding.
Yes.
Because we have got to restore health care. 550,000 people in Illinois may lose their health care as a result of what Donald Trump has done and the MAGA Republicans in Congress. And I hope that one of the outcomes of standing up and not passing that bill is that we get restoration of most or all of the health care that is being taken away.
I hope you're right. And I'll say this, it's a tricky spot for all of us who work hard to elect Democrats and support Democrats, but also our base wants to see Democrats fighting harder. So what we're walking the line in our organization of talking to our activists, talking to our base, saying we've got to keep putting pressure on our Democratic friends to do the right thing, which we know they want to do.
Yes.
But also putting more attention on the Republicans, who we only need a couple of them to break with Donald Trump to restore sanity to Congress and moral clarity to our budget. And they are not willing to do that. So we will make sure they are punished. That means we are going to go after every single vulnerable Republican in the House and the Senate from now till Election Day next year to make it clear to their constituents that they would not stand up. And all of these consequences are on their laps.
Well, that activism is hugely important because, look, most folks are just trying to get to work, get
They
home,
are.
put food on the table for their families. They don't have time to get engaged in the details of the big ugly bill that got passed. And so they're not going to really feel it until, well, those provisions go into effect, which is next year.
Right.
And so we need to make sure that they understand that if they let it go, if they just let the Congress stay as it is, that they're going to lose health care, they're going to lose nutrition assistance, they're going to lose so many things that matter to them. I mean, middle class and working class people are going to suffer. It's incumbent upon us, and as you're describing, the activists, that you talk to every day, to make sure people know and are ready to go vote in November of 2026 against these Republicans that have put this into effect.
And I think the good news is, and I'm curious if you're seeing this in Illinois and through the work you do across the country, our activist base is more energized and fired up than I've ever seen them. When we reached out to folks right after the Trump election and said, I know, do you need a minute? Our text team was reaching out to our top activists in every state saying, I know you're probably demoralized and you might need a minute, but let us know, or are you ready for the next fight? And we had an unprecedented response. Folks were ready. They're fired up. Yeah. They want to be at these No Kings rallies. They want to, fight back. They want to be given tools. We had an activist summit and had a couple of hundred abortion storytellers and activists from all over the country. And I was frankly surprised because this was when the DC militarization was happening, right? And folks don't want to be here. We're having ICE raids down the block from where I live right now. I mean, it's a stressful time to be a resident in the DMV area. But folks are turning up and they're turning out. And I'm curious to hear from your vantage point as governor. Are you seeing that in Illinois?
Yeah.
It sounds like you are.
I will tell you that I've told this story many times. There's a woman who right after Donald Trump got elected for his second term, so back in January, February, there was a woman in Edwardsville, Illinois, which is a 28,000 population city in Illinois, who was so outraged at what Donald Trump was doing already just 1 month into office. And she's in a kind of a red area of the state, a Republican voting area. So she needed to do something. She wanted to do something, but she felt helpless. So she made a sign, right, protesting Donald Trump and what he was trying to do. And she went and stood at the intersection of two, state highways with her sign by herself. Wow. She just stood there with a sign and held it up. And somebody came by, somebody walking their dog, and said, what are you doing? And she said, well, I'm protesting. Well, look at what Donald Trump is doing. And so this is what I thought I should do. And they said, oh, can I stand here with you? Sure. So that was the first day. The second day, 4 friends showed up to join her. Now, every Friday, 300 plus people show up to protest where she stood with her one sign. That gives you an idea. This is a Republican area of the state.
Tell me the name of the town again.
Edwardsville.
Yeah, okay.
And
we're going to look up Edwardsville.
You should. Yeah. And Andy is her name. This
Andy from Edwardsville.
Woman, yeah. Who and just that kind of the protest that people are doing things they've never done before, right? Yeah. To show up. The No Kings rally is one example, but in Chicago, right now, ICE is raiding neighborhoods all over Chicago. And people are showing up at the ICE headquarters in Chicago and sitting and blocking the driveway into the ICE facility. And they're protesting. And these are people, many of them are not, professional activists or, they've never shown up at any kind of a rally before. And they're just outraged. And now they're showing up at these things. And when they see ICE vehicles coming into a neighborhood, they're shouting, go into your homes, stay out. ICE is here.
I saw a video of one of your state senators running through the neighborhood, yelling to everybody to stay inside, and then yelling at ICE agents saying, take down your mask.
Exactly. And this is and she's not alone. I mean, she's, of course, an elected official, so you kind of expected from an elected official. Yeah. She's somebody who is active. But imagine that there are now people who are walking around with whistles.
Yeah.
And when they see ICE, they blow the whistle, and everybody knows that's a signal, right, to get out of the way. And again, I want to be clear with everybody, because Donald Trump wants to say, we're somehow protecting criminals. No. Mm-mm. Violent criminals, please. Come get them. If you go get a judicial warrant.
Right. Due process.
Right. Get a judicial warrant. If somebody is in fact a violent criminal, please go get them. I don't want them on my streets either. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about literally the Supreme Court's now given them permission to go pick up people who just look different than Donald Trump, right, and speak differently. And my family were immigrants to this country. Most people here in this country were immigrants to this country. We should be protecting immigrants who are paying their taxes, holding down jobs, raising their families who've lived here for years.
More than that, we need immigrants. This economy will collapse without immigrants. Let's be honest about it. It's not just humanitarian and the right thing to do. We don't function without immigrants.
I often point out, if you're really talking about the economy, and I think many Republicans just want to focus on the economy, fine.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. 50%, almost 50% of Fortune 500 companies, these are the largest companies in the entire United States, 50% of them founded by immigrants or the children of immigrants. We need that entrepreneurial spirit. We need people who are driven to succeed, who show up from other countries. By the way, immigrants have a lower crime rate than people who are born in the United States.
Say that again.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm a first-generation immigrant, and I have brown skin, and I have taken to carrying my passport with me everywhere I go because I don't know.
So this is what I've been saying. I've said this many times in the last few weeks. Do we want to be a country where people have to walk around with citizenship papers?
Well, we are. We are.
Well, this is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
This is what happens in authoritarian countries, where they want to target people. They want to call people immigrants, people that are their political opponents. They want to call them immigrants and make them other. And then it's easier to make them illegal.
Yeah.
And then to take them out of the country, sometimes to do worse.
So that's a good segue to, what we're seeing right now in the news from last week, the really horrific murder of Charlie Kirk. And political violence, I think we would all agree, is abhorrent and is not something anyone on our side supports. We are, however, beginning to see, weaponization of folks who disagree politically with the president. His Attorney General, Pam Bondi, talking about prosecuting Democrats and liberal organizations, going after foundations that support progressive organizations that do things like organize rallies like No Kings. We're in a really scary and disturbing time. I think the only silver lining in all of this is I've seen more Republicans speaking out and saying, hey, that's protected free speech. That's not what we're about, but not quite enough. I think in the whole DC progressive ecosystem and in our activist base and in our citizenry of the District of Columbia, people are scared. Nobody wants to see political violence rise in this country. What happened to Charlie Kirk is shocking. What happened to Melissa Hortman is terrible and horrific. What happened to Gabby Giffords all those years ago was horrific. I think nobody understands it probably deeper than folks in the reproductive freedom movement because of what happened to Dr. Tiller in his own church and what happens to abortion providers almost every single day. So we're in a difficult time, and you are, frankly, someone a lot of us look up to and look to for moral clarity. So I wanted to talk to you about this moment we're in and how you see us moving through it and getting out of it.
Well, I think, first of all, in this moment, let's just acknowledge that what happened to Charlie Kirk should never happen in this country.
Absolutely.
It was an assassination. It was, very tragic, honestly, for the country, not just for his own family. And I want to express my condolences and sympathy to his family and friends. This should not be accepted, and no one should cheer it. Very importantly, I think that we need leaders in this country who will call for calm in these moments. We've seen this before. There have been awful shootings that have taken place, political violence. And presidents of the United States have regularly stood up and said, everybody, take a step back. Yeah. Let's remember who we are, that the purpose of a democracy is to avoid political violence, right? What do we do when we disagree with one another? We argue we take advantage of free speech, and then we go to the ballot box.
Right.
And that's how things are done. And when you disagree, you carry out your disagreement in that fashion. But now what we're seeing is a kind of acceptance, seemingly, of political violence. And we need leaders to stand up and remind people who we are as Americans. Unfortunately, that's not what the President of the United States is doing. I have seen some Republicans, and I want to give some credit to Spencer Cox. I think he was trying very hard,
yes,
especially in those.
He's the governor of Utah.
Yes, very difficult, and he's a friend. It's somebody that I've gotten to know through the National Governors Association, and I think he's a good person. And he stood up and listen. We're all emotional in these moments, and he, I think, wanted to express outrage while also reminding people that we need to bring back peace to the political realm. And I want to join him in that call. In fact, I did in the first day after he said that. I think it's important for us to remember that speaking out, protesting peacefully, expressing our outrage with our voices, and then going to the ballot box. Again, those are the things that we do. Calling people extremist and blaming it on one side or another. Remember, Melissa Horton is a Democrat who was assassinated,
right,
and her husband, and the state senator and his wife who were also shot.
And there was a list of abortion providers on the assassins list.
Exactly. I mean, and I made sure that in the aftermath of that every one of our Republicans who were elected to office in Illinois knew that our state police was available to them. And if they felt at all unsafe, that we would listen. We need to do that. Leaders need to do that. I'm so disappointed so far that the president hasn't been willing to stand up and do that. It doesn't seem like it's in his nature. And I don't know, except that maybe governors are the ones who need to speak this. And I certainly have. And I said it just the other day myself at a press conference and talked about how important this is. But working across the aisle, and I've reached out to some Republicans just to say, like, can we work together to bring the temperature down? What do you think we should be doing? But all I can say is maybe a little bit of time will help.
Yeah.
I just wish that we had more calls for calm.
I agree completely, and I think governors have a huge role. I think as progressive leaders in this activist infrastructure, we also need just to go back to our roots, which were, rooted in like nonviolent civil disobedience.
That's right.
Every major fundamental freedom we've won in this country has been through that path.
The civil rights movement came about and happened because of peaceful protest.
That's right. And I, as an immigrant from India, I have this picture, the picture of MLK with the picture of Gandhi in his office.
Yeah.
Because it's this beautiful sort of through line of how, he fought against apartheid in South Africa, then fought the British in India, then inspired MLK, who then inspired, the great John Lewis. And here we are in their footsteps. And it's hard with all of this hateful rhetoric to remember that is one of the core ways we organize.
And remember that one of the great sayings of Martin Luther King was, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. But I want to add something to that.
Yeah.
It only bends toward justice if we help it bend toward justice. We have to be engaged in that. It doesn't happen by itself. It takes people, good people, to stand up and do the right thing. And this is a moment when I think people can stand up and do the right thing and ought to.
Well, I am privileged to be able to stand up and do the right thing with you. I'm going to end with some hard-hitting questions that everybody wants to know from the governor of Illinois. Deep dish or tavern style?
Oh, my gosh. Deep dish pizza. First of all, I think you can look at me and see that I've had my share of both. No. But deep dish pizza is where I land in that debate.
Do you have a favorite restaurant, or is
I'm
that
not
too?
going to
That's
call
too
it that's controversial. We've got a lot of really great
there.
deep dish, yeah. And don't forget, we're if everybody's seen the show The Bear on FX,
love The Bear.
Yeah, and so we're now known for our Italian beef.
Yes.
So I hope everybody comes to Chicago at least to try the deep dish and the Italian
And the
beef.
Italian beef.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a show? I know you're so busy. Do you get to watch television?
I do, and
Well, you just said The Bear.
Yes, I mean, I have to pick and choose because I
Right.
don't have a lot of time. But sometimes, if I get time on a Saturday or a Sunday or maybe late at night, or I will turn on something that I've heard is really good, and especially things that are filmed in Chicago, which I love to watch. Dark Matter, if you've not seen that on Apple Plus, is filmed, and of course The Bear, and all the Chicago Med, Chicago PD.
Chicago Fire.
Chicago Fire, exactly, are all filmed there. I've been really getting into documentaries lately. There's a lot
have you seen the Billy Joel one?
I have not. My wife has told me
that.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I'll have to go there next. Yeah.
Yeah, same. I haven't seen it yet, but it sounds good.
I really do. I enjoy these days anyway, documentaries, and of course you can tell I like shows about food.
Yeah, I mean, listen, who doesn't? I love shows about food. Okay, last question. What's your perfect Chicago day?
Oh my gosh. Well, I got to start with a really perfect day is my kids are in town. They're both in college.
Yeah.
So my kids are in town. I get to spend time with them. And it was my daughter's birthday party was last night. So I got to spend time with her. She was in Chicago for that with her friends. So my perfect day for me is that I get up. So I get up really early in the morning. Like people think I'm a little crazy. My staff.
What's really early?
I get up about 4 in the morning. And my staff starts
painful.
to get texts from me at 4:30 in the morning.
God.
Yeah, but they know this is what they have to live with. They don't have to respond right away.
Okay.
I'm not demanding in that way.
Is that true?
Yeah, that is true. That's true. But I want to leave it there so that when they wake up, and they've got a few things from me that I've thought about. So I get up early in the morning and I like to take a walk on the lakefront. We have,
gorgeous.
Really, the Chicago lakefront is spectacular. It's unlike any place else in the country. We also have some really great other 606 and other trails. But so I love to do that to start out in the morning. And then, I hate to tell you, my wife says, when people ask, what does he do when he's not working? What does he like to do? And she looks at him and says, he works.
Always working.
Yeah, so I'm sorry to say that, I'm less fun than I might like to be, or my wife might like me to be, but there's so much to do. And I do enjoy, what I really enjoy doing is accomplishing things. I know that sounds like I'm interviewing for something. I'm just saying I love to get things done.
When you love what you do, it's not work.
Yeah, exactly. My uncle used to say, when you love what you do for a living, every day is like a vacation. And I love the job that I have, and that's why I'm running for re-election. I love the job that I have. And then, of course, spending time with my wife, which, as my kids, we became empty nesters.
Yeah.
And I was a little worried about that because all of a sudden after, 18 years, you look at each other and say, well, what are we going to do now? Who are you? But I have to say we have enjoyed ourselves. I hope our children aren't listening, but we really have enjoyed going out to dinner together and spending time together, going on vacation, just the two of us sometimes. So, a great day for me is spending time with my kids and then having alone time with my wife.
I have little kids, so I cannot imagine it, but I know that. But it's a movie, but it goes so fast.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It goes so fast.
Listen, my daughter just celebrated her 23rd birthday,
wow.
And I must say that I have this. When I think of my daughter, when I close my eyes and I think of my daughter, I think of when I was holding her right out of the hospital, and I just remember falling asleep with her, right on my shoulder like this, and just at kind of 1 and 2 years old. She's 23 now, and so it's hard, and she's got a lot of friends and boys who come around knocking at the door. Yeah.
Oh my God, what's that like for them?
Yeah.
Knocking on your door to talk to you to take out your daughter.
I bet it's pretty intimidating.
Yeah.
I don't try to be intimidating to them, but I get because I also have state police.
I was gonna say.
So they know they're like armed men somewhere nearby, so they have to be respectful.
I feel like there's another joke in there, but I'm sure they're very respectful.
They are respectful.
Regardless.
My daughter is the important thing, not so much respectful of me, although they are. But anyway, but
it's I can't. Yeah, I mean, my kids are 6. I have 6-year-old twin boys, and I cannot even imagine dating.
Oh.
That feels like a whole other kettle of fish, and a whole other podcast that we'll do in the future about parenting and dating and navigating. But
that'll be a fun podcast.
That'll be a more fun podcast. But what I will say is, you've got a daughter, and she's growing up with less rights than your wife.
She
and your
knows
mother.
it too. She knows
So
it.
that brings it all home.
And it really does. And she talks about that. I mean, she knows because she did not know her grandmother, my mother.
Yeah.
But she knows what my mother did and fought for. And so when she is thinking about what's happening in the world today, she thinks about how we're moving backward. Like, what happened? We were moving in the right direction, and now we're moving backward.
What's her name?
Teddy.
Teddy? Okay, so as I close, I'm going to thank Teddy. Your dad's awesome. Thank you, Teddy's dad, for joining us on this podcast. Thank you for fighting for all the Teddys across the country. I know she's proud of you. We're proud to be your partner and your ally. You're doing a ton, but you've also shown our audience how we can fight back. There's so many ways. Activism, in your personal life, as a policymaker, as an advocate to folks in other states who are policymakers and fighters. So to our listeners, here's what you can do to join us, to join me and the governor in the fight ahead. I want you to text POD, that's POD, to 59791 to get involved with us at Reproductive Freedom for All and all the work we're doing across the country with great champions like JB Pritzker. Like, follow, subscribe, wherever you get your podcast for more of these conversations. Governor, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's been delightful.